So we'll go ahead and get started. It's 2 o'clock on the dot. So my name is Courtney Mulvaney. I'm a career identity coach in the Career Development Center at NC State. I'm also an NC State alum. I got my bachelor's degree here, went to UNCG for my master's, and just got into a PhD program at NC State. So I'm going to be a double Wolfpack grad, which I'm very excited about. So I'm going to be moderating our panel today, and I want to go ahead and start by introducing our panelists. I'm going to call on a panelist, and then once you're done introducing yourself, how about call on one of your fellow panelists so we can just popcorn it around. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Lucy Wellmaker.
Thank you, Courtney. My name is Lucy Wellmaker. I am a graduate of UNCG, have a master's in counseling, and started off my career as a school counselor. Then that led into life coaching. Did some work in nonprofit, and always kept doing the life coaching. I've written a book, and currently I'm working as an HR manager at a manufacturing company that's just outside of Greensboro. Tiffany.
Thank you, Lucy. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Waddell Tate. I'm a double Wake Forest graduate, and I currently work full-time in higher ed and university advancement development, but I also run my own career coaching and talent development firm called Career Maven. I've been doing that for about 3 years. I launched my career about a year after undergrad in student affairs, in the academic advising, career coaching, career development realm, and did that for about 10 years before making the pivot to fundraising and alumni engagement. But I launched my company largely because I spent so much time working with students and early career alums, helping folks figure it out, and had a lot of fun doing that. And I spend a lot of time in one-on-one coaching now and running learning and development sessions for organizations and teams. So happy to be here. And I'll call on Chris.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Tiffany. My name is Chris Kelly. I am an NC State alum. I have a bachelor's and master's in industrial engineering. I actually only graduated about 2 years ago, and since then have spent my time at Deloitte Consulting, doing a lot of supply chain and process improvement stuff. And actually, in the last week, I've switched careers to a different company called Celonis, which is a software company doing similar process improvement work. And I guess a fun fact about me, I'm totally taking advantage to this virtual life, and I live in a self-converted camper van and travel around the whole country still working full-time, still advancing my career, and totally embracing this change. So happy to be here. I love networking and that kind of thing. And I will call on Nicholas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas. I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A today. I'm a current student here at NC State. I am majoring in political science with a minor in psychology, and I've been working for the Career Development Center for the past year and really love it. I will call on Stacy.
Thank you, Nicholas. So I am Stacy Connell. I currently work for a company called Technogym, which is a fitness equipment and wellness technology manufacturer. Our company is based out of Italy. So a little bit about my background. So I do have a undergraduate degree from Florida State University, and my master's is from the University of Georgia. I spent 14 years working in higher education, focused on well-being and recreation work. So part of my career, I spent 4 years working at NC State at the now Wellness and Recreation Center Carmichael, which I hope many of you are familiar with and use to pursue a healthy, active lifestyle. And being a part of fitness has been a really important part of my career. So now what I do is I do lead sales for this company, but I've done a number of different roles. I also own my own consulting business for well-being called SLC Wellbeing. So I help provide holistic solutions, whether it's everything from speaking engagements to analysis of strategy development for well-being for different companies and organizations. And I do a lot in the space of wellness design. So helping to build healthy buildings that are healthy for people to occupy. So really exciting stuff. I co-chair a national task force for health and well-being, and I also serve on a well-being advisory council for the American Cancer Society, Partnership for Healthier America, and the JED Foundation. So I am happy to be here. I think my spin on this is going to be, as you pursue a career, do one that supports your overall well-being. So I am so happy to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And so now I will call on Trudy.
Thanks so much, Stacy. Delighted to be here. A special welcome to all the students. The Raleigh Triangle area is a place that is near and dear to me. I'll start with that I really miss going to Rise. If any of you have been there, best biscuits and donuts. And I live my life right now between Boston and New York, and I'm sitting in Boston with a lot of snow. I currently am the chief strategist for the Americas for a company based in London, though we have offices all over the world, called Capfinity. We do recruitment, technology, and assessment solutions for global Fortune 500 companies, but we also are on a very involved social mission involving really leveling the playing field for all students. And so we do pro bono consulting work for nonprofits and higher education institutions. I love this work. I leaned into it. This is an organization really that has great integrity and is very focused on really making opportunities available to students wherever they reside, if they're at NC State University or they're at other institutions around the globe. I spent the biggest part of my life, which is how I met some of the great folks at NC State, as I was the Associate Vice President of Global Career Development for New York University, and I was responsible for our students at our 11 campuses around the globe, as well as in New York and Washington, D.C. for their career development. And I have a passion, particularly for helping first generation college students and do consulting and other pro bono work for students to really help lift them up. And I'm super excited to be here and really thank you for asking.
Thanks everyone for sharing a little bit about your background. As I'm sure you can see, everyone on this panel has had some kind of creative approach to their work. They may start out in one area and have transitioned into others, or are living in a camper van, which is pretty cool. So everyone here has had a unique take on their career, and that's why they're on this kind of creative panel. I also am a super kind of creative person. I started out in one field, thought I was going somewhere else, and I also love the arts. So if you're here, you're probably interested in that as well. So we're going to go ahead and start off with our questions. And our first question is, what is your best piece of advice for reaching your career goals? And we're going to start off by asking that particular question to Lucy.
Okay, so best advice for career goals. I'm going to share what I do with clients when we work. I do a lot of group coaching, and I'm all about wow moments. That's what my book is about. And so I like to use that wow as an acronym. So the first W is about wins. I think it's really important to acknowledge what you have done. Because when you start with the positive and what you have done, you're just building the momentum for moving forward. So a win might be, you've got your LinkedIn profile completed, or your resume is done, or whatever that might be. Then the O is obstacle. What's your obstacle? What's your challenge? And that's a place where you really need to spend time with someone that you trust, that can be a sounding board, that's a good listener, and to get the clarity that you need on what really is the challenge, what is the obstacle. And then the third W is what's your next best action step? So, in reaching career goals or any kind of goals, it has to be action oriented. So oftentimes we think of big steps that might be too big. And I'm a big proponent of baby steps. Taking a small action step that will continue that momentum moving forward. And then you just do it again, over and over again. Take the step, celebrate your wins, figure out what your obstacle is, and keep moving.
I think, Courtney, when you ask that question, I think it's really important to, like, in the context of actually starting a job or starting an internship, to obviously work really hard. That's the first step, I think, is, making sure that your work ethic is unmatched. I'm a big proponent of actually giving a little more than 100% on the things in your lane. Even if you're an intern, like, you can really set the tone for how much people are willing to sort of help you tap into their network or speak on your behalf, not just because you had the job, but because they can speak to how you showed up in your work. But I also think that when you're setting goals for your career, it's really important to leave space for flexibility, because you may have a plan to, I think Chris said he started out at Deloitte and then he shifted. And I think everyone else shared some place that they started and then they shifted. And even when you have a really linear plan for what you want to do after college, life happens, things happen, your interests change, your values change. And sometimes if you create a plan that's too rigid, you get stuck just trying to pursue what it was you started out to do without leaving room for possibility. So I think, in terms of reaching career goals, I like to, kind of encourage clients and students, especially, to think about what are the benchmarks of learning that you want to achieve, or what are the values that matter most to you. Like, if there's a certain earning potential you want to pursue, then there are going to be, certain things that you might say no to if they're not aligned with that. Or if you want to learn a lot about supply chain, then you may take a certain position so that you can learn as much as possible and then shift to something else. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be a straight line, but as long as you're learning and leaning into kind of mastery of whatever that thing is, then other opportunities will happen. So that's a roundabout way to say, set some goals, but leave a little bit of room for flexibility. And make sure you have either accountability partners that you're sharing your goals with, or structures in place where you're tracking your progress.
Could I just add one thing to the great stuff that Lucy and Tiffany just shared? Just two really quick takeaways that really build on both of their great responses. One is, don't be afraid to ask for help, especially now during COVID. People are really open. Employers that you may think, oh, they never respond to me, people you've met in your life, or people you may be following on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Don't be afraid. I had a question and I reached out to a reporter I follow, and he answered me the other day, like somebody pretty famous. I was shocked. And I think a good friend of mine, Marie Artem, heads global talent for Enterprise Renter Cars. She says out of the 100 students she used to speak at live events, and she would always say, here is my email, please contact me. And only 1 out of the 100 would do it. Don't be afraid to do that. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to make a mistake or fail, because the most successful people learn from that. And especially during this time, I think it's important to take some type of risk and try things out that will give you great satisfaction in your career.
I 100% agree with the don't be afraid to make a mistake. Failure is one of the most beautiful teachers. I'm a first generation college student and I failed chemistry my first semester at NC State, and I almost dropped out because I didn't think I was smart enough to be in college. And now I'm going to get a PhD at NC State. And I think that that really leads perfectly into our next question, which is, directed a little bit towards Stacy, but of course anyone's free to chime in, which is, what do you wish you had done differently in college, or what do you wish you could tell your college self?
That is such a great question. When I think about my college experience, I was someone that said yes to everything. And I think as I look to where things are today, when I saw the question, I was like, that's a wonderful question, because there's so many different ways. And so I look back at my college experience and I think, number one, get involved if you're able to be involved virtually and in person on campus. So I think finding those moments to get involved in social experiences, in career development experiences, and in different learning opportunities that might just be a little bit outside of what you're thinking you're going to do. Because I do believe there is an idea that an author I follow has, and it's called this idea of the year of yes. And it's like saying yes to the things that get you excited. And so that's something I think in my career, saying yes to those opportunities, or even things where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And so I think that's something that finding those moments to get involved. Personally, when I think back on my college experience, and I know that this is it's a weird time for this right now. Yes, by Shonda Rhimes. Thank you, Tiffany. Wonderful book. So one of the things that I think back on my college experience particularly is I was involved in a number of different ways. I worked on campus. I got an opportunity to be like a DJ at our on-campus radio station. I worked within the campus rec center on campus, teaching fitness classes. And obviously you can see how that has become a part of my career and what I do today. But I had many different experiences in a campus ministry and volunteering. But one of the things that I look back on, and if the opportunity allows for abroad travel, I would strongly encourage study abroad. When I had moments to travel abroad during my career, but I think during my career as a student and also professionally. But I think there's something really rich about getting to observe and absorb a culture that you just can't get from like 2 weeks in a country. And so I think that is a really rich experience. And if and when that opportunity opens up, that's something I think about a lot, is the ability to really become a global citizen and what that could look like. So that's something I think about I would have done a little bit different personally.
So we have a really great question from one of our students. And this is a student who is a current wellness coach at NC State. They've traveled the country in a converted van, so they've got a couple different connections to our panelists already. And they want to know, they're about to graduate and they're creative and they're nervous about balancing their passion with financial security. So one of the questions they have is, what are the pros and cons of freelancing and self-employment, such as coaching? I know we have several panelists who have had opportunities like that, so I'd love to get your input on that.
I'd be happy to share, because I actually have left a full-time career to be focused 100% on my business. And now I have another full-time job in addition to my business. So I'll share my experience. So I do think that I was in a place where in my career, I spent 14 years working in higher education. I had another 5 years in corporate wellness. And so I had these really rich experiences where people were calling me all the time and inviting me to come to their campus or to their company to help consult. Like, they're kind of like, what do we do in this wellness space, which is a really, like, the word wellness can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And it's kind of, you got to live in this oozy space, as I like to describe it, like you're trying to pour something into something solid, and it can be hard to define. And so I worked with these different companies, and it got to the point where I had my full-time job. My last position was at Georgia Tech in higher ed, where I served as the senior director for health initiatives, overseeing health and well-being for all of the students and employees. Wonderful role. But I kept getting drawn into the space of consulting, and I was like, this is really fun to help create strategy. And I was thinking about my impact and my purpose and really my why. And I love that something that's really important to me is to inspire health in all places for all people. And so that was, I was getting these opportunities, and it was getting me out of my Georgia Tech space. And, I went to Portland, I was in Boston, I was in different places. It was very exciting. And so it took this moment for me to say, okay, this is what I'm doing without really focusing. I didn't have a company. I didn't have an LLC. I also have 3 children. So it was hard for me to figure out, like, how am I going to make a business and work full time and be a mother and reach all of my goals. And so I was fortunate to be in a place where I was able to take the plunge into starting my own company without even really deciding what my company was, but I was already getting these opportunities. So I sort of knew what I was doing. And as I founded SLC Wellbeing, and started consulting and speaking more professionally and more intentionally, it gave me this great opportunity. But I will tell you, I started my business and then the pandemic hit about 9 months when my business was an infant. It was 9 months old. And so I had a lot of resources saved and was really kind of thinking, but I was on a retainer agreement with a large health insurance company. So I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia, with a large health insurance company. I was on retainer with them. I had several projects going. I was working with the American Council on Education on projects. But when the pandemic hit, people stopped hiring independent freelance contractors. They were going to look at the resources they have internally. So all of a sudden, everyone wanted me to do what I was doing with them already for free. So I love to give back in many ways, but in order to support my life, I have to generate income. And so that's where that adage that is often shared is, find something you love and figure out how you can get paid doing it. Well, the getting paid doing it stopped happening. So in about June, I was at this place where I was doing a lot of little things here and there, but I wasn't getting a consistent enough income like I was before. And so, I was fortunate because I never thought I wanted to go back to working a 9-to-5 job after not having a 9-to-5 job. So that was the key for me. I figured out what was working for my life and my lifestyle with having 3 children and all of the different variables that life has for me. And so I had a consulting agreement with a fitness equipment manufacturer. And when that company, the company that was a different company than Technogym, who I work for today, Technogym saw what I did with them and they're like, oh, we want to hire her to consult with us. So I had a little consulting opportunity. And then that led to them offering me this sales position. And being in sales is so different. I don't go to an office, whether there's a pandemic or not. It's a very different type of role, and it's been a really great move. And so I'm sharing all of this because starting your own, I'm still able to have my business and I still get a little bit of work. It's probably the same volume of work I would have received if I was focusing on it full time. So it's just been a very interesting time. So as you consider, going freelance or working for a company, my advice at this moment, given the economy, given the pandemic, would be if you're able to land a full-time job, I would start there because you're getting some great benefits like health insurance and retirement and some of those things that you have to pay for your own health insurance when you are freelance. And so I do think there's pros and cons, and then you can create a goal of creating a company at the right time, whenever that kind of fits for you and in alignment with what you have going on. So that would just be my advice for that specific question. I'm sure different people might have a different response, but based on where we are today, it's hard to start something new in this economy.
And I know that Trudy had something to add as well to that question.
Thanks so much. So I just wanted to quickly add a couple of things. One is, we all talk about career decisions. I don't think people make career decisions. I think you have to make life decisions and what is going on and what your financial cushion is to be able to do this. On the other hand, I think when you are younger and don't have children, a mortgage, and all these responsibilities, that is the time to try things that really give you great satisfaction and great passion. The best advice I can give is that if there is a way that you can pursue a full-time opportunity that you absolutely are excited about. When I mean excited about, it's not like I'm just doing it for the money, but I'm doing it because maybe it's not 100%, but 70, 80% of the time, I really like what I'm doing. And as Stacy said, you get health insurance and then start growing your freelance contract or consulting business, whatever that is. So then you can launch that. And I do think having a plan, not being afraid to try, and being creative in the way that you approach and build that is a great thing to do, especially when you don't have bigger responsibilities that often make people make decisions that are really not about focused in on the purpose and what gives them great career happiness.
Thank you, Trudy. That's great. So we have a pretty diverse panel. We have people who are recent graduates, people who've been really established in their careers. And, Chris, I'm really interested to hear you are a recent graduate of NC State. So how did you make yourself stand out among the competition when you were looking for your first job without going overboard?
Yeah, I think the best way for me to answer this is really just to think about the people aspect of careers and development and interviewing, and even when you start your first job. So I think a lot of times people are pretty like overwhelmed with interviews, and they think that they're talking to somebody on, let's say, a different level, like, oh, they're the boss, they're the manager. Oh my gosh, I'm just a college student. And I think my approach to this was to really just make it personal. So very often was asking questions about, like, what do you do outside of work? How do you manage your well-being? What are working hours like? Kind of those off-kilter questions. And as I went through the interview process, I found that most people interviewing would rather talk about those things than like specifically their job interview type questions. So at the end of the day, you really are going to spend 40 hours or more a week working with somebody. So if you don't like hanging out with that person more casually, then probably not going to be a great fit in the career place. So I think as you're interviewing, that's a great tactic to keep in mind. And as you start your career, keep that in mind even then. I think it's great to set check-ins with your managers, talk about things that are a little informal, ask specifically like, how am I doing? What can I improve upon? And if you have that personal connection, it's a lot easier to have conversations than just maybe a year-end review or something like that.
I love that advice, Chris. And I would share, as someone that hired a lot of people in my higher ed side of my career, I hired many sort of entry level positions in my role at NC State, University of Georgia, Georgia Tech. And one of the things I would also say is that, remember, they want you just as much as you want to be there, and they want the best person for their company and their organization. So I think to remember that while the dynamic certainly is in the favor of the employer in a hiring process, I would also share that they're looking to find out the authentic you. So I would also just share, like, be yourself, sell what you do well, what you bring to the table, who you are. This is your chance to celebrate yourself and what you've done and your accomplishments. And I think it's just really important just to remember that dynamic, that it isn't just, they should also be trying to woo you as well. So I do think it's a two-way street in the interview process.
Definitely. And I think that's talking a lot about like what it's like to make the transition from college to career. That's a really intense kind of transition to make. And Lucy, I wonder what advice you would have for students about making that transition.
Yeah. So you're right. It is a big transition from college to career. But my advice would actually be, don't make it such a big deal. I think it's just the next step. You can probably think back to when you went from high school to college and how big a deal that was and how scary it was and all the things that went through your mind. And now you can look back and say, it wasn't that big of a deal. When we make things a really big deal in our minds, it can often just cause us to shut down and not take that next step. So, one thing that I, thrive on is positive self-talk. You kind of have to talk to yourself and say, I've got this, it's okay. Mantras, everything's always working out for me. I can do this. It's just one step. It's just the next step. And everything is going to work out. And like somebody said earlier, it's not going to be a straight line, and it may not be what you thought. I think when you go from college to career, suddenly the world becomes your classroom. And it's very important to keep paying attention, to do your homework, to take notes, because life will nudge you along the path where you need to go if you're paying attention.
Yeah, and really, I just want to jump in real quick to combine Lucy's and Stacy's like two comments about it's just the next step, and the employer is looking at you the same way as you might be looking at them. like when you're going through an interview process or at a company, like it's very important to think, do I like this person and do I want to work with you? Because it doesn't make any sense for you to go to an interview and get horrible vibes and be like, oh my gosh, that was terrible. I couldn't connect at all. And then to still like drive yourself crazy pursuing that option when there's so many others out there and so many other steps you could take. So just keep that in mind.
It's like dating, right? You want to make sure it's a good match both ways.
It's true. And I think a lot of students maybe get kind of, especially with the situation with COVID and the job market, I think there's a lot of pressure on our students who are going out into the job market to accept the first offer they get. But, I'm curious kind of what y'all think about that with the current job market and students experiencing that anxiety over their interviewing.
Can I'd be happy to take that, Courtney. So one of the interesting secrets, and some of you may have heard of the author Lindsay Pollack, who's a colleague of mine, we've been doing a bunch of research together. There's actually more jobs going on during COVID than anyone has ever anticipated. And a lot of students, though, just said like, oh, I've got to take the first thing, or there's nothing out there because it's COVID. And that really isn't the case. So I truly believe that if financial concerns are really the forefront of your mind, you've got student loans to pay, and it's really important, you still can look and weigh your options and choose the best one. But I also wouldn't accept a job that you really know you're going to be miserable at, because what would typically happen is you would maybe start that job and you would be immediately dissatisfied. And if you're dissatisfied and you're not excited about an opportunity, you are not going to excel and you're not going to stay. You're going to be looking for the next thing. So I think you really should weigh your options. No job is perfect, but I always use the famous 80-20 rule. If it has 80% of the things that really excite you, turns you on, really gives you joy, that's what you should really be pursuing. If that job is like, in your gut, I don't like doing this, I may do it well, but I don't like it, it's better to keep your options open and look for other opportunities, because I agree with Chris, there will be another opportunity out there. There are many, many jobs out there.
Yeah, and sorry, feel like I keep talking, but real quickly to add on to this specific question from a tactical perspective, as you're looking for jobs as a student, I think one of the things that COVID has done is changed the recruiting cycles from a typical fall and spring to kind of any time throughout the year. So I was on the recruiting team at Deloitte, and we were like having trouble finding enough people. So it's basically because like companies, as soon as they're able to start, maybe being a little bit more steady with profit or whatever, they start hiring more. That's happening like at all months, all time of the year now. So I would say just keep that in mind in this remote kind of crazy time we're going through. It might not be fall and spring. It might be every single month, anytime in between.
I just wanted to chime in as well. There is a great book called Designing Your Life, and I'm trying to remember the name of the author, but I would highly recommend it if you're at that moment right now where you are deciding kind of your next steps and figuring out like where do you want to go, and that would be a really I think it would be a really well timed exercise, doing it before graduation, sort of before you're in that career search, right, where you're looking for that first job, because I think what you'll find is it helps to build a nice strategy, and it helps to have a little bit of introspective as to what that well-lived life means for you, right? It could be in a camper, it could be in the suburbs of Atlanta, right? It's different for all of us. And so I think it's a really great exercise to do during this time, because like I said, while the jobs are out there and there's a lot going on, I think certainly making sure you have the intuition to say, and the self-awareness to understand when it's a fit and when it's not a fit, and when to say yes and when not to. And so I think it's a really great book. When I was at Georgia Tech, we had lots of student reading circles that we used with this book, and when the students really loved it and really enjoyed going through that book together. So I would highly recommend that at this time.
And I know being someone who's creative and probably the type of people who've been drawn to this panel, we have a lot of interests and a lot of things that we feel like we could do and really be happy. That 80% that Trudy mentioned can be very large sometimes, and that can be overwhelming. So there are books like Designing Your Life. We also have the Career Identity Program at NC State that I help to run that is really designed to help you find out like, what is the thing that is a part of your 80% that you want to make into your potential future. So I recommend if you've ever kind of been curious about your major or your career path, check out that program. And you know, I know for me, what I'm doing now is not what I expected I would be doing in college. So I'm kind of curious, Tiffany, how do you respond to someone when they ask, what do you want to do after college? And maybe you're not sure.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think, pre-COVID, that question comes up so much over, holiday dinners and special occasions. Everyone wants to know when they haven't seen you for a few months and you're off at college. Part of my answer, the caveat here is it kind of depends on who you're talking to, right? Like if you're having a networking conversation, the way you frame out your answer might be a little pointed because you might want to leverage that conversation for other conversations. But ultimately, I think it's really important to be honest and just say, I'm not sure. But here are some things that I've done in the classroom that, have really revved me up. Or I did this cool internship last summer at X company and I learned a lot about why. And I'm really curious to see how that might, grow and expand for me out in the marketplace. I don't think you have to know, 100% what is the exact job function, what is the exact industry. If you know those things, it's great. But most jobs, again, don't really turn out that way. And so if there are courses that you've taken or projects that you've worked on, or, you found you had a really cool experience in this lab or whatever it was, those are indicators probably for the types of contexts where you might want to work. So you can sort of pluck out 1, 2, or 3 examples that you've experienced so far. So if you're a first year student, and you had a kick-ass class, last semester, and you're like, you know what, that was really cool. And so I went and I learned a lot more on my own. You can talk about that. If you're a junior and you've had an internship or an on-campus job, or, you're deep in your major and what sort of layer of that topic even or not, right? Like it's going to be different for every student. And so I think it's okay to say, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I'm really interested in environmental sustainability, or I'm really interested in consulting. I have a friend who graduated last year and I've learned a lot about what their first year was like. And I'm really interested in exploring that, but I'm also keeping my options open, right? Like the more honest you are, the more that people can help you and connect you to other people or share information with you. I remember what it was like to be in college. I was a theater and psychology major, and I had this mini period of time where I thought, oh, I'm going to go off to Brown and be a director, and that's what I'm going to do, because I was really enjoying that at the time. But that really wasn't what I wanted to do for the long haul. And I think, I think earlier I said something about flexibility. I think it's okay to be transparent with people, even when it's scary, because that's where sort of these happy moments happen and people can help connect you.
Something you said, Tiffany, I think is just so important about like when you're explaining yourself to someone else, not only does it help you get the clarity you need, but it allows other people to help you. They have to know what you're looking for, what you're interested in, and people by nature want to help. So instead of just saying, I don't know, I mean, the more you can offer, the more they can help.
Absolutely. I think that that's one of the keys that I've realized going through all of this is that people really do want to help you. If you are able to give them even the tiniest nugget of, you know what, maybe I don't know what I want to do or what industry I'm interested in, but I really like talking to people. Here's a skill that I really want to use. Then they're going to be able to help you most likely develop that skill and turn that skill into something more meaningful. We have a great question. We're fortunate in this panel to have several entrepreneurs and people who are definitely self starters. So we have a student named Talia who's interested in How do you find consistent clients or customers for that entrepreneurship kind of endeavor that you're taking on? How do you find customers? How do you find your audience? They've been building a fashion business, but social media can be a bit draining to rely on for all of the sales. So they're curious to what the panelists would say to that.
That's a complicated answer. I would offer that when I launched my business, largely my clients came by way of referral. So people would invite me to come and lead a workshop for their professional association, or I was in Charlotte at the time, and there was a executive search firm that asked me if I'd be willing to be on their vendor list for resume writing, because that's what I did at the time. Over time, that's grown and changed a bit. So the way that most of my clients come to me are either by way of referral still from past clients, or they've seen content that I've posted on different social media channels. So I do try to track where my leads come in from on the client side. On the business to business side, it's a little bit different, but social media is a job. So I always tell people, I have not quite figured it out fully. I've recently outsourced it because I just don't have the capacity to do it 100% myself. But it's really important to remember that social media is a catalyst and you don't own the data. So whatever you're posting online or sharing on social media, the real end game is to convert those people into your own community. So whether that's an email list or going through a series of resources that you have hosted on your own website, and you can build a free website. It doesn't have to cost money. It's really important that you push people off of social media into other places where you can communicate with them, so that if Instagram goes offline for a month, you're not sort of stuck out in the water. And you can continue following up and sharing information with those people who may not see it on their feed, but they will read your weekly email, for example. So for the content of what I do, that's been a really good model. I'm sure other panelists have insight they can offer.
So one of the things that has been effective, both in my consulting business and also in my sales role, which being in sales is kind of like being an entrepreneur and having your own business in a lot of ways too. And so one of the things that I would suggest outside of what some of the great things that Tiffany has shared is there's a lot of different networks that you can pay to get leads from. There are ways that you can generate leads for your business. So for example, if there is a network, I'm trying to insert myself into the fashion industry, but I don't know a lot about it other than I buy a lot of clothes. But what I would say is if there is, say, for example, a buyer that you're looking to connect with, maybe it's like a Nordstrom or something like that. If there's a group, you can actually pay a fee to get a database of this segment. So an example I can give more directly to my work is I'll do it a lot in the medical space with pro athletes, pro sports. And so there are ways that we can receive a database of information. So I think that's something to consider because that is a way to get the contacts that you're looking to get without necessarily using social media and your own post. And then like Tiffany said, you can put them into your network. So that is one way. I do want to say that both in my independent business and in my sales role, I have received, it's amazing when I generate my own content, both on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and I don't have a professional Instagram account, but I'll kind of put in a little bit of content here and there. I have people that come all over that they convert into leads for me, and some of those people have converted into accounts. And so I would say that you do want to still have that social media presence, because I can really track, as Tiffany has said, and I have a lot of success in social media for my business, both in sales and independently. So I do think it's a time suck. But certainly if you're able to engage and if you see success, right, because you can see where people are coming in. Also, I would recommend having a good CRM. So with my independent business, I was just kind of tracking all of my clients in a spreadsheet for a while, and then it kind of got a little bit overwhelming. I had an email list and some other things too. But I would say definitely having a good CRM for the long game if it's something that you're going to be a part of, big picture.
And Stacy, could you tell students what a CRM is?
Yeah, so a CRM is a database to manage your customers. I can't remember what it stands for exactly.
So one
I
of
feel
the
like
other
Chris
things,
could step in on that though.
Customer relationship management.
excellent. Stacy, one of the things you mentioned too while you were talking was LinkedIn. That's something we talk about a lot with our students. And, having a good LinkedIn profile is really important to really start networking. So Trudy, I'm interested, how do you use LinkedIn? And when you are receiving requests from students, or requests from anyone, how do you decide which ones to accept and which ones you aren't going to accept?
So I'm probably going to blow up everybody, but I pretty much accept everyone who writes to me on LinkedIn. Now, what I do, and I would recommend this to students because, there are a percentage of the world that are crazies. But I pretty much look, if I'm unfamiliar with who they are, I might just click on them and see a little bit about them. If I want to know more, I'll Google them. And then for the most part, I'll accept them. And the answer is, and the reason I do this is because as you're growing your network, you never know where that next opportunity is going to come from. When I officially retired 3 years ago from NYU, and I started I started working. Literally, I had my first project a week later, and it came from an unlikely source. And I think that you will be surprised that, and some of the comments here is that people really do want to connect. They want to help you. And there may be something that you don't even know that that person is thinking about, or they may have somebody in their network that can really lead you to the next thing. And so I do think growing your network, obviously being careful. I wouldn't, if you're in LinkedIn with somebody, I think there's very little downside. I just think, I wouldn't be providing personal information through direct messaging until this person is vetted or that you have something in common. But I really do think that amazing opportunities, and it speaks to the last question, you do not know what is coming next. It's not a straight line. There may be your interests may change, your values may change, your circumstances may change, and there will be people in this network who will help you every step of the way that may be unexpected. So I'm mostly accept it. And I invite all of you, whoever wants to link in with me, I'm there for it.
Yeah, Trudy, I'd love to add in too that I was a little skeptical throughout college of how useful LinkedIn actually was. But now being in the corporate world or whatever, I found my new career at LinkedIn, through LinkedIn. And it was through a connection I had never heard of before. I honestly had never even heard of this company before. But I got a message from somebody and they were like, hey, we think you'd be a good fit. We looked at your profile. Do you want to talk about it? And, I saw little risk in just saying, yeah, let's have a 10-minute phone call, hear more about it. And then that led me to where I am now. So I have a new job and it's going great. And it meets at least 80% of those requirements you talked about for making a career change. So yeah, I would encourage all students to keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. Try and make it as thorough, if not more thorough than your resume. Just put on, tactfully what you have going for you. And then you'd be surprised who will reach out and what opportunities will present themselves.
I want to add one thing, and I will put in just one other thing about me is I served on the LinkedIn Product Council for several years during my tenure at NYU. One of the things that students do is often in the headline, it's I'm looking for an internship or I'm a soon to be graduating student. Put in what is aspirational for you, what field you really want to go into. And by the way, major, except if you're going to be an engineer, an accountant, a physician, it's irrelevant. It is really your strengths and your capabilities and your skills. And put that in so somebody will see those capabilities, strengths right in the headline and some of the job sectors that you're interested in. Aspiring creative director in advertising, those kind of things will get traction on LinkedIn, and obviously things that are important to you. So I'm a big believer in LinkedIn and other platforms for doing this.
I'll also say with LinkedIn as an entrepreneur, one of the other pieces is that as most of my business for my personal business has been through 100% referrals, word of mouth, that type of thing. They've had a good experience. They're going to recommend it to somebody else. But I have had, especially with COVID, I've had people where they're like, I need a wellness speaker, Atlanta, right? Because no one can travel anywhere. So I've had business just from that. Like people are just keyword searching. And so I would also say that if you are looking, like I'm thinking of, I think it was maybe Talia that asked had the fashion design background. I think, you could put in a couple of keywords and people might be looking for that too. So big fan of LinkedIn. It's been very effective in all aspects of my career.
I want to just, because you mentioned keywords, and it's off of LinkedIn a little bit, but one of the things that most major organizations use is an ATS. And if you're a student out there or you're a job seeker, applicant tracking system. When you are uploading a resume or an application in ATS, you look at the job description and make sure that keywords matching that job description are in your upload, because if not, the algorithm will not find you. And most students think like, oh, I don't want to copy it. I want to be original. Put in those words, because that's what the recruiter is going to search on when they're looking for candidates.
And Lucy, I know that you have to jump off pretty soon, so I just wanted to follow up with you on that question, see if you have any last minute networking tips before you have to jump off.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, and maybe this is a given, but regarding LinkedIn and reaching out, I think it's real important to include a note, and how you know the person, how you've met them or whatever. If I get an invitation and it doesn't have a note, I might respond with a note. And if I don't get a note back, I just feel like they're just clicking a bunch of things. And, I'd like to have a real connection. So that's just something to keep in mind, is to include the note. Even though it's optional, I think it's important. Yeah, with the pandemic, it's hard to do the face-to-face networking. So LinkedIn is a great tool. Also, networking doesn't have to be done in a formal setting. I mean, do what you enjoy doing, the things that make you feel good, whether it's going for a walk or a run or in the gym, and take a moment to speak to the people that cross your paths, because I don't think that it's a random thing. I think the people that cross your paths are the people that you're meant to see that day. So taking a moment to speak and making that connection, amazing things can happen from that. I think that's important. I appreciate being on here, and I do apologize for having to leave early. I've got another Zoom at 3. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Lucy.
Thank you.
I wonder, do any of our other panelists have any other tips on networking during the pandemic? Things are a little different, just to see if there's any other looks on that question.
I would say, shoot your shot, right? Like you can invite someone to have a 15-minute virtual coffee with you. And when you're doing that, I mean, my tips are largely the same as they would have been prior to the pandemic, but make it really easy for people to say yes to you. I think, send that personal message, like Lucy mentioned, like a quick why, like, hey, saw in your profile that you work at X place, really interested in learning more about this industry. I'm a senior at NC State. Would you have time to chat for 15 minutes in the next 2 weeks? If they say yes, I'd be happy to. Then send them a follow-up, set up the Zoom, send them a calendar invite. So all they have to do is click and join, and come prepared with a few questions just to guide the conversation. There's something, I dropped a book recommendation in the chat, but there's something that happens to people. I think, I can't remember, forgive me, it's Sunday and mom brain. I have a 4-year-old. So, but there's something that happens to people. I think serotonin, like we get a boost of serotonin when we feel like we've helped someone else. And after someone has a networking conversation with you, they've spent a lot of time talking about themselves, and it literally feels good to their brain. So you know, even if someone doesn't give you a connection or a job opportunity, there is something about being able to help someone just make a connection and just understand something a little bit more deeply and share your own story. So as a student, you know, I think it's really important to maximize the fact that you're a student, and people, you know, most of us have all been there before, and we're willing to talk to someone because we know that you're just trying to figure it out or get to that next thing. So because we're in a pandemic, it's really easy to set up a, you know, not too many, don't overwhelm yourself, but a bunch of networking calls over the next 2 months. You could have a lot of really rich conversations, but just make it really easy for the person to say yes. We talk about that on the entrepreneurship side, like make it really easy for people to hand you their money. Like you just want to make it easy, like a straight line to, you know, from information to activating it. And the same is true for networking. And also follow up and say thank you for the time that someone shares with you. I remember, you know, meeting with a lot of students when I was in the career development space. And we always wonder, like, what happened? Like, did you get the job? Did you get the internship? You know, how did that interview go? You know, don't ghost people. Like, follow up and keep like a little spreadsheet on the cloud where you can just track the people that you've had conversations with and their contact information, and a little, you know, a little note just to jog your memory, because those are people that you may want to reconnect with in the future. And those conversations can help you now, but you're also building your network that you're going to carry with you over the arc of your career.
Just want to add one thing because I agree with everything Tiffany just shared. We're talking a lot about LinkedIn, and I would also say before you reach out to people, you also may want to think about looking up people and following them on Twitter. I have used Twitter so much. I follow people and companies that I'm interested in, and then I make a comment. And then if I reach out to them by a direct message, they see that I'm following them, or that I've had something interesting to say, and I'm not just, you know, as was shared earlier, clicking. And I think, you know, really people are getting used to this world during the pandemic. But I predict, and I think I'm not the first one to say this, the world is going to be hybrid. Like we're never going to go back to exactly what we knew before the pandemic. And so trying to find ways that are comfortable for you to reach out to people, especially during this pandemic, and find people that might have something interesting to have a conversation about, but make it quick because people are over zoomed. And so that's why I think making it easy to say yes, which, you know, I will quote Tiffany on, I think is really good advice, but look for other platforms, not only LinkedIn as well.
And I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists. I know that we are getting close to our kind of wrap up time today, but thank you so much for saying yes to helping out some of our NC State students today. And, you know, students, as we mentioned, definitely feel free to reach out on those social media and LinkedIn platforms to connect with, you know, us panelists. We're here to help you in any way that we can. But thank you all so much, panelists, for saying yes and giving us some of your time on this Sunday. We really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Courtney. Thanks to everybody. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and I'm going to turn off recording now. So we'll be here for just a couple more minutes if any students want to stay and ask any more questions.